Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And Sanjay welcomed everybody and he spoke about the industry and the users being here. I would especially want to make mention of the presence of our friends from 6 different countries who are present here for this discussion today, and particularly welcome the Ambassador of Iran. Thank you for being with us. So we now go to the first session, which is transforming the space and geospatial ecosystem for national development. And our keynote speakers have actually covered almost everything that has to be said regarding this session. We have got some experts from the industry with us, and we would like to hear their views. So I invite on the panel first Mr. Vikas Kita, Vice President Larsen & Toubro. Please join us. Saurabh Rai, CEO Aras Technologies. Please join, sir. And Klaus Deininger, lead economist from the World Bank. Please be seated. So, Vikas, before we start with you, I want to relate something which, as a cadet in the National Defense Academy, we used to travel by a train from New Delhi to Pune, and we used to go via Kalyan and, sometimes go into Bombay as well. And one hoarding which we used to see was, "We make the things that make India proud." And that was the hoarding of Larsen and Toubro. So that picture remains in my mind, and that is what we are all talking about today. And of course, little did I know that post-retirement, I would join the Defense Board for a couple of years. So I will now request Vikas. You see, L&T has been playing a major role in our space sector for the last 5 decades. And with the opening up of the space sector, particularly, post this reforms that were announced, the geospatial reforms, the space policy reforms, the guidelines, and the drone policy reform, all these put together have led to an expansion of the space and geospatial sector in a big way, particularly for the private sector. So, what is on the anvil of L&T, what it's looking at for the future? We are aware that you are already contracted for making launch systems in collaboration with HEL, but more about it, more about the future plans and how L&T and other industries of your size can take on the responsibility of making India in the space and geospatial sector.
So thank you very much, sir, for having me here, and thank you also for the very kind and warm sentiments towards L&T. So we exist because we have a customer. It's as simple as that. So good afternoon. I'm Vikas Kita. So coming to your question, see, clearly I will be unable to reveal our strategic plans here, but I'll give an outline of what we are up to. We've been working for the last 50 years in both defense and in space as a DCPP development cum production partner with DRDO and also with ISRO, which puts us in a slightly advantageous position. We do understand both the military needs and the civilian needs as applied to space. So clearly, we've been sort of pushing the envelope right from India's first rocket onwards, at a time when my bosses tell me in the company we did not even have calculators. So things were done with using a slide rule. I was more fortunate and I had slightly better technology to work with. What we are now looking at is an integration of space on the military side. Space has become increasingly important both for ISR. Our two nice neighbors, at least one of them, reportedly has glide vessels. Hypersonics has taken on in a big way. So these are just certain areas that we are looking at. The Indian Air Force presumably will have somewhere in future requirements of reusable launch vehicles. India will have its own on the civilian side, will have a need for a space station. We had initiated discussions on a space station with a US firm who subsequently ran into financial difficulty. Some remnants of that discussion continued till today, but now with NASA. So we are also hopeful that when the US requires its next space station, Indian firms will have a role to play in the supply chain. And with these areas from an export perspective, we've also been developing our own capabilities in-house. So now what are those capabilities? So if you look at where we stand today in space, we may have certain capabilities, but the materials, the components, etc., all tend to be imported. So if you start with composites, we do not really have composite manufacturing in the country. Now, if one was to get into that area, it also helps the civil aviation sector, and also with the requirement of drones, that's an added market. So from our perspective, that's an area where we would not get into composite manufacturing ourselves, but we would facilitate industries who are interested in going into that area. The next big area is electronics. The government has been pushing. So electronics and sensors, so localization of those is very much needed. That's one area where L&T has also jumped into the space. We've set up a semiconductor business, initially fabless, till we bring about sufficient volumes. So these are two areas. Then there comes the areas of building up launch ports, space parks, manufacturing clusters. So because we also are in construction, so there's a whole lot of activity going on that in that domain. Then there is the aspect of skilling and technology. So we've partnered with a few institutes. Actually, space is not a discipline taught in the engineering curricula. So I was one of the very fortunate few during my engineering. We had the option of aerospace engineering and propulsion engineering as elective subjects. I did my engineering from Trivandrum, College of Engineering Trivandrum. So the rest of my batchmates are in VSSE or ISR also. So that is, we have a business in the education space where we are pushing these disciplines also into engineering curriculum. Then there is, because we've been in the realm for some time, so there are also discussions going on how to make FDI, the FDI policy that's been announced, how to make it really work. So there's a startup ecosystem. We support ISPA, and ISPA is the organization which actually, we have DG ISPA here, General Bhatt. So they're actually enabling so we support ISPA. So the idea is that we also need to have a vibrant set of startups. The defense primes or the large firms cannot do everything by themselves. So, and we would need to democratize all this. So we are actually looking at on a commercial, in commercial terms, we are looking at a 5-fold increase in turnover by 2033. So, of the space economy. And a large part of this increase is to come from the upstream and the downstream sectors. So, we've engaged with all the stakeholders to make this happen. A large part of this growth is to come from exports. So that's something we've been talking to the government on. We do need space attaches posted, especially in the southern hemisphere. So I'll pause here from now because other speakers need to speak.
Thank you. I forgot to mention that if anybody has questions which we cannot wait till the end of the session, they can just raise their hand and I'll come to you. Next, right to left, is Saurabh Rai, CEO of Ayahas. So, Saurabh, sustainability is the buzzword. We know this planet cannot do without sustainability. And in your 2 decades of journey in providing, apart from other things, sustainability technologies, both for domestic consumption as also for export, what has been your journey like? What has changed consequent to the liberalization of the sector, and what has not changed, and what you would wish to change? We've already been, informed by Sanjay that India's geospatial exports far, outnumber the imports that we make from the United States, for example. But what's the situation with other countries, and how are you going about this?
Thank you, sir, for that great question. Let me relate my 20 plus years of understanding, of course, in context of sustainability and advancing space and geospatial industry. Just this morning, I got a call from okay, let me put it this way. I got a call from administrators of Ayodhya, where we are doing Sustainability City Index. The challenge was that a lot of watersheds and old waterways have been taken over in the I would say urbanization. The city wants to go back to its past, wants to revive those channels, look into those kind of opportunities. What do we do? And here the answer we all know, being from the industry, it needs a combination of space, it needs a combination of IoT, it needs a combination of some drone and some field analysis, and of course very smart data-based, data-backed geospatial analytics and geospatial insights. Answer is straight and clear. Now, what components of it are there available in India? We have a wonderful group of scientists and data operators who can deliver this. That part is sorted. More are needed for sure. Are the sensors available in India? Perhaps no. Are we importing it from elsewhere? Absolutely yes. Looked at the satellite data, and then we do not have a 20 years satellite data, sir, I am happy to be corrected, that can be compared at that same scale if I want to do a change detection. So we'll have to rely on somebody else to provide it for us. Something very similar for drone. I also tried to look at the whole digital twinning that has happened for the city. Again, while doing digital twinning, the agenda was more urban development, etc., and forgot certain critical aspects that still need to be enumerated in those digital twins. And we are talking of large industrial smart cities here in the country. Now, talking of a very important city, talking of what is available and the latent demand that is there in the country itself, I can say that Make in India and advancing this ecosystem can be spurred by Indian demand alone, let aside international business and let aside the business in dollars on which the industry has been surviving for last 20 years. So the way I see the industry is, pick up one sector, talk of sustainability, we are talking of sustainable urban development, sustainable rural development, we are talking of sustainable agriculture, climate. 10 days from now, we will start seeing the smog in Delhi, we are talking environment. You just name that one sector, that in itself can spur enough and more business for the city and for the industry to survive and grow. And then there are bigger sectors like defense and transportation and whatnot. The question is, are we doing enough? Maybe yes, maybe no. We are trying to follow the mobile model when it comes to development. We are trying to become an assembly. Tough answer. I was in a drone summit and I talked to a number of drone manufacturers few days back. All that they are trying to do, and no harm because the technology does not exist or it takes time to develop, they are doing assembly. Rather, the space community is being a little more forward looking, little more innovative. And of course, software development companies like ours are trying to come up with some unique use cases. So, to really advancing this industry ecosystem, the industry needs to take advantage of the opportunities that are there in the country. And that is when a sustainable industry will develop and further. Otherwise, extreme reliance on exports, extreme reliance on assembly instead of manufacturing, extreme reliance on not having the components and depending upon somebody else will actually hamper our growth, is how I see it. We are at that inflection point where our own inertia and our own demand can really drive this industry many notches.
Thank you, Saurabh. So, one point is that definitely we need component level manufacturing within the country. And I think the government is taking initiative in this regard, first in the ESM spec sector and then specifically in the component sector. And also our initiative in the semiconductor domain is well known to all of you. And we'll have somebody later in the day who will be talking to us about the semiconductor industry that is beginning to take shape in the country. Moving to my left, Klaus Denninger, Development Research Group of the World Bank. So, self-reliance in space and geospatial cannot be overstated. You've already heard about it. But what's your perspective on this? And then also, space and geospatial are very capital intensive sectors. And a lot of money is required. Some comes through grants, some comes through different types of funding. The budget for this year for space sector is about 13,000 crores, which is a little more, 4% more than the last year. But even that is not enough. The government has announced 1,000 crore venture capital fund for startups. Also, there is the technical development fund of the DRDO. There are private venture capitalists and angel investors in this sector. But is this enough, or is there a better mix that is being practiced worldwide? So let's have your views on that.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's a great pleasure to be here. And I think, let me answer to your question in 3 points. I think, of course, the World Bank is trying more working with governments. And I think our focus is first to make sure that economies have the skills, the infrastructure, and also the regulatory environment that will allow private initiatives to flourish. And that, I think, there, as we have already heard, I think India has made rapid and very commendable progress in terms of improving its regulatory environment. And of course, these are things that we are measuring internationally, where we're doing like the ease of doing business and other indicators to help countries compare them. I think the second point, which is also very critical, is that policymakers face unprecedented challenges in terms of urbanization, in terms of climate change and climate disaster, and in terms of the need for rapid rural structural transformation. All of these require spatial recognition, they require spatial technologies, and often policymakers are not really equipped and in a position to use the cutting edge technology, and that is where we are trying to actually really help and provide a bridge. And for example, in India, because that is very important also for the financing, because once you have proper spatial records, and I refer especially to land records, I think you can have mortgage markets, you can have financial markets functioning much better than they do even now also in India. And I think you can also have governments, especially local governments, raise more taxes for local services. So all of these are aspects that are critical for the financing of the sector and for the investments that are needed, and that we are trying to promote and help countries to actually establish. And then, of course, the third element really, and that is where I think a lot of the discussion at this forum is about, is that we help and where we try to help India to overcome what is generally called as the middle income country trap, where countries only imitate but not really get to the innovation stage, and where they really go to the technology frontier. And that is something where I think we have some good examples. I think Aadhaar and digital payment infrastructure by India is really a very good example that is world class. And adding space to that, I think, can really transform and multiply the uses that can be made of that information, which would be something that could also provide exports from India to other developing countries. And we see a lot of potential for that and look forward to the discussions during this forum and also further on to see how we can help to promote that further. Thank you.
Thank you, Claude. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of some very senior officers from the armed forces. We have Vice Admiral Sopti, Deputy Chief of the Naval Staff, Lieutenant General Vineet Gaur, who is the Director General Capability Development, and Air Vice Marshal Pawan Kumar, who is the Director General Defense Space Agency. So I'll just request if they could like to make some remarks of what they've heard in the discussion so far.
Thank you, General General, for this opportunity. As a user, I can bring out a little bit of the user perspective. A small anecdote, I'm also a navigator by profession, and as a young officer, we had something called satellite navigation systems. We used to wait every 3 to 4 hours for a satellite pass to give us that information. And that's about 35 years ago. And 30 years ago, the GPS system started coming in. I mention this because in the marine world, positioning was the most critical aspect for us at sea, because earlier than that, we used to depend on astronavigation. And now that has become a common thing. For the Navy especially, we realize that oversea, if you have to communicate with each other, beyond the short tactical horizon of V or UHF, that's about 15-20 nautical miles, we need satellite communications. And therefore, in the early 2000s, we started this initiative with the ISRO, and we went on for communications. I mentioned communications because some of the speakers earlier, they've mentioned positioning and timing, they've talked about surveillance. I'd like to give a little emphasis on communications. What is happening today is that autonomous systems are coming in, and we need to exchange a lot of data with them. So that's the frontier that we're really pushing. We just don't have enough bandwidth available to us overseas, especially, to be able to do the kind of network-centric operations that we're looking at. And as autonomous platforms increase, both airborne as well as surface, we will need to exercise some control over them. Today, a lot of autonomous airborne platforms are limited by line of sight communication, but overseas, if you have to do that over hundreds of kilometers or hundreds of nautical miles, as we call it, then that is what we need. LEO systems, which are now supporting 5G mobile telephony, it's not yet come in India. We're looking forward to that coming. And as it happens overseas, we will find that we will be able to use this for data communication as well as for mobile telephony. It will make communication so much more easier from us at sea, as well as be able to connect for whatever network-centric operations that we need to do. So I don't see why is it that the private industry is not looking at this. Why are we waiting for Starlink or OneWeb to come and set up services in India Why don't we just do it on our own? We have the capability. A word about the service segment. That's another area that we're really excited about because surveillance measures are available. Pixar is here. There are so many companies which are providing imaging, Earth observation imaging, especially including over sea. But there is so much information, so much data. That's only somebody who can make sense out of that and provide us with useful information, actionable intelligence as we call it. That is where, so analysis of the information that is coming through is another segment that we're interested in. Government programs are large, but they're also slow. We recognize that fact, which is why we are so keen that the private industry, private sector participates actively in this. And I think great inroads can be made in the service segment to start with. As far as the space is concerned, go for the service segment first, then for payloads like the sensor payloads that we're talking about, subsequently for satellites, and eventually for launch systems. And when the private industry does mature to launch systems, we are also looking at applications like low-cost cruise missiles. Why not? Because at the end of it, it's an airborne platform that is moving. And that's the area that we can capitalize. These are spin-offs that I'm talking about, launch systems, low-cost cruise missiles. So we are excited, participation in the private industry to come and help us, users, to make our battlefield as transparent as our adversaries have that transparency already. So thank you.
Thank you, Admiral Soptia. That's quite a lot of work for the private sector. Vineet, very shortly, very
Yes,
briefly, rather.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving this opportunity. We as Indian Army are already looking at a satellite which is going to come up, the NSIL and the ISRO's commercial wing, which is going to already the contract is signed, and we're looking at this satellite coming up in now around 3 years from now. We have done a lot of investment as far as the satellite-based ground terminals are concerned with regard to communication, whether it's Ku band or now looking at Ka band. We have some issues with the extended C band now being kind of reserved. So we're looking at X band, which is possibly not being used so far. So some industries which can look at the X band kind of transponders can make it and possibly join with an SIL to look at that part of the spectrum which we can possibly use. That's my first request to the industry here. Now, the second part is when you look at today the satellite launch capability we have in India, tremendous progress which has happened. There are some startups or the MSMEs who say that we can launch a satellite in 36 hours and launch on demand. We have a 3D printed satellite which can go up. Absolutely wonderful to actually know that. But the same question which the gentleman on the dais talked about, the sensors and the ability of you having the sensors on board to be able to make a complete solution is something which we are lacking. So the big companies need to possibly have the thing which Mr. Sanjay Kumar said in the beginning, that there is a difference between Make in India and Made in India. And I think Make in India precedes Made in India, which means first you get those who can come and make in India. And once you start rubbing shoulders with Make in India systems, possibly you will reach the Made in India, where you have IPRs, you have solutions which are indigenously grown, and you have the semiconductor industry to kind of support that. So my second issue is this low Earth orbit satellites. There is a lot of space which is there, and the private industry is now coming up and saying that we can actually give you that kind of a thing where you can have low Earth orbit satellites. So how can we kind of energize this low Earth orbit satellites, where a lot of services can be possibly thereafter be given by the private players here, and it could be again a public-private kind of partnership with ISRO on one side or some such organizations coming to possibly launch that. Other than that, I think the targeting was a very important thing which Dr. Chandrika came with an idea. It's absolutely wonderful. Today you look at the conflicts the world over. The key is to be able to target your areas the quickest possible time, and I think that is something which this emerging space defense market can look at. How can we have systems? How can we have services? How can we have those kind of projects where the targeting can be of pinpoint accuracy? These are some of these things which I thought upfront come to my mind when we look at space-based systems.
Thank you, Vineet. Thank you. Pawan, would you like to? Quickly, please.
Sir, firstly, thanks for inviting. And what I would like to mention, sir, as Defence Space Agency, we do collate requirement from all three services, whether it is intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, position navigation, timing, satellite communications, space situational awareness, space domain awareness, uplinking, downlinking. And luckily, we also have a R&D directorate working, which is in very close collaboration with the industry. Rather, we carried out a domestic tech scan, and after carrying out a domestic tech scan, what came out that the capability is really appalling in particular fields, and that is how the concept of IDEX challenges and Aditi challenges, Aditi 1, and thereafter all came up. We are closely following it up. And I absolutely agree that we have to have the military public-private continuum, and that is the only way to move forward. Whether we talk of US or whether we talk of of another neighbor. As far as whether and each field that I named is a topic in itself, and one can go on. But what I would like to sum it up that we are working with the industry. And we strongly believe that military public-private continuum is the way forward in all these 5 fields that I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Pawan. And in the interest of time, hard stop. I take this opportunity to thank my panelists. Please applaud them. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.